It was a fun game. Obviously, it was a very high-scoring game. Weren't sure that was going to be the case, right? I mean, the Browns, certainly as they're currently constructed, I know since Jameis Winston has been the starter, it's been a little bit different, but they're known for the defense, right? That's the more talented side of the ball, the more solidified side of the ball. And then the Broncos, we've highlighted on this show how great the Broncos defense has been this season. Who knew that Riley Moss was going to now get MVP votes for how that defense looked without him on Monday night against Cleveland, but we'll get into all that. Let's start by talking about Bo Nix, though. You obviously talked about sort of the show, which produces 41 points. Pick six certainly goes into that with some of the interceptions that Jameis Winston threw. But Bo Nix on the night, 18 for 35, 294 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions from Bo Nix. And when you look at some more of the PFF stats, 76.0 PFF passing grade in that game. 2 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. Just your thoughts overall, Bo Nix. I mean, it was a game where obviously he had the big-time throw, which I think that we'll talk about because it really changes how you kind of look at Bo Nix when that was a narrative about him going into the season in his scouting report. But it was one of the games where it's just a 60% adjusted completion percentage. We're not used to seeing that from Bo, but we're also not used to seeing some of the deep throws that he had in this game, one in particular, that long touchdown throw. Overall, your thoughts on Bo Nix from Monday Night Football?
Yeah, I was actually really happy to see that grade on PFF this morning because I thought when I went back and watched the film, it was better than watching how he played in real time. I think there's an awful lot of situations where you couldn't really ask for much more than him. I didn't think that the Broncos' early game plan was as sophisticated as we're used to seeing from them, particularly in the protection world, what they were doing with Myles Garrett, often leaving him one-on-one a bunch against Garrett Bowles, being really pass-heavy, not really getting the run game going until late in the third quarter. So there's an awful lot on his shoulders. He was forced to speed up his process a bunch, and that's where he's had some trouble this season. And when he's kind of settled in over these last 6-7 weeks is when he started to trust the interior of that offensive line we've discussed before, has been really quick working through second, third reads, getting to his check downs. Last night where it was fun was that wasn't really an option for him. Things were just closing on him too quick. So it's, can you play then at a super sped up game? And there was some bad errors. There was the dropped interception where I thought it was pretty sloppy, pretty poor rookie stuff where Rodney McLeod should have picked him off. But then you mentioned the huge big time throw. I don't know how you could throw a ball any better than that, right? Perfect concept versus coverage type situation. Really good situational stuff from Sean Payton. He knew exactly what the Browns wanted to do in that situation. They run that inverted 2 coverage that they busted on that one. Like 46% of the time in third and long situations this season. So they had the perfect play call dialed up. And Nix, it wasn't like he could just sit there and read out, right? It was really, really quick. It was within the flow of the concept. And that to me is the thing that's encouraging with him is we're seeing a little bit more down the field. We're seeing a little bit more in the intermediate section of the field, but it's happening quicker. It's not just that he's got so much time because the interior of the line's played so well. He is speeding up what he does. He's still a little bit scattershot. But I really am liking the progress we're seeing over the second half of the season.
The average depth of target for him, 13.2. I just went back and looked this up. That is the third highest single game average depth of target that he has had since his freshman year at Auburn. So you look at all 5 years that he was in college football, and then obviously this year as well, that 13.2 average depth of target is the third highest. And the only other two that he has, there was one game at Oregon where he had a 13.6 average depth of target. And then his freshman year at Auburn, there was one game where it was like a 14.2 or something like that. And college is obviously different than the NFL level as well. NFL defense is a lot tighter. You'll take things a little bit shorter. Normally, the average depth of target goes down when you get to the NFL level just because you can't take as many deep shots as you do at the college level. So for that to be in the realm of some of one of the highest average depth of target games was fantastic for me to see. And what I love the most about Bo Nix in this game is it was very... To say it was un-Bo Nix, I think, is unfair to him. It was very un-Bo Nix of the narrative about him, right? I mean, people thought like, oh, he's just this, low average depth of target, low or high completion percentage type of a player, screens, mesh concepts, slants, things like that, timing routes, getting the ball out of your hands quickly. But the thing that I like the most about Bo Nix is that not only was his adjusted completion percentage down, and that he threw multiple turnover-worthy plays for the first time since week 1, he won the game when those things were present. With the talk about Bo Nix has always been, well, If you give him the perfect situation, if you give him the perfect surrounding, then sure, he could win some NFL games for you. He wasn't perfect. The whole setup wasn't perfect last night, and yet they still won the football game. Now, obviously, Jameis Winston giving away some pick sixes, some interceptions, some turnover-worthy plays, that goes into it. I understand that. I fully understand that. But you need these types of victories in the NFL, sometimes where it just doesn't look pretty. And I think for the longest time, people didn't believe Bo Nix was that caliber of a quarterback. It's almost like they said, well, if he doesn't go to the Detroit Lions like Jared Goff, then he's just not going to be a good quarterback. And that's not the case. Like, even independent of the massive big-time throw that he had to Marvin Mims, him not playing well but still doing enough to win the football game was really encouraging for me, and it should be for any Broncos fan out there as well. And I'm glad that he gave us the frozen rope deep throw of that big-time throw to Marvin Mims, because it reminded people the guy's always had a good arm. People that didn't think, now, like Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson, no, that's not what I'm saying, but to me, Bo Nix has always had like a tier 2 caliber arm for the NFL level. He just didn't throw it a lot when he was at Oregon. And you're seeing it more and more because Sean Payton, I think, is empowering him at the NFL level to say, dude, we didn't just draft you to be really smart with the football to go to it in short areas. We drafted you because we know you can make those throws deep down the field. I'm going to dial them up and I'm going to scheme them up for you, and then we want you to hit them. And last night, I think, was a great example or reminder that the dude's got the arm in him. We just didn't see it a ton at Oregon, but it was there if you watched enough Bo Nix film. And that's why I was encouraged about him and why I understood him going in the first round and taking that bet on him, and why we're seeing some good investments from him here. Any final thoughts on Bo Nix before we move to the other side of Jameis Winston?
Yeah, just to put a cap on what you said, I think the aggressiveness is all around. I mean, to have that kind of depth of targets, a defense that bases out of 2 deep shells, right, is a different animal altogether than playing a team who is revving up the blitz a ton and you think you can beat it and keep a bunch of guys into protection. He was turning down easy throws to hit more difficult throws down the field. And I get the completion percentage wasn't exactly what people would look at and think of Bo Nix, but he was passing up easy throws for trickier throws and ripping 15 yards down the field. And I think that is just so encouraging to see. And seeing the confidence from Peyton too. They clearly had a plan for what they would do in 3rd and long situations. And you would not have thought, certainly me, coming out of draft night, that Sean Payton would have felt comfortable saying, we are going to run a 3-seam heater, keep 7 guys in protection on 3rd and long against Jim Schwartz when we know someone's going to move and rotate and do something funky. And I believe that this guy can not only hit it, you mentioned there the arm strength. This was not a tier 2 arm where you can stand back and rock and kind of like really drive through the ball, right? This was a completely in rhythm, natural arm talent throw. And we will not see, outside of maybe something Anthony Richardson does that we've never seen before because he does the wildest things, but that level of big time throw in rhythm, that is Allen-esque, that is Mahomesian. And I just did not think we would see that at all with him, frankly. And to see it this quickly in his development is just so encouraging.
So on the other side of things, Jameis Winston, 34 for 58, 58 attempts for Jameis Winston. I mean, if you tell me that Jameis Winston's going to get 58 passing attempts, I'm watching the football game. I don't care. Like, I'm turning it on. I'm going to the football game. It's the most entertaining ticket in sports anytime that he's playing in a game. And getting to 58 attempts, I mean, some crazy stuff's going to happen. 497 passing yards in this game, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. 2 of those interceptions were returned for pick sixes. And I do want to be fair to Jameis. It's 4 turnover-worthy plays, but it was only 1 turnover-worthy play before that 2-minute drive where he had the second pick six. Right before that, it was just 1 turnover-worthy play. It was that pick six, and so then there were 2 more turnover-worthy plays, sort of when they were just trying to push the ball deep down the field and needed to really get down the field. So I don't really count those as much. So for all intents and purposes, I would tell you that he had 2 turnover-worthy plays in this game when the game was really still within hand. So it's not the worst night in the world for him, especially because he had 2 big-time throws as well. Obviously, the 4 touchdowns and orchestrating things in that way. What did you think of Jameis's performance? Obviously, a massive roller coaster, but if you take away 2 of those 2 turnover-worthy plays, his 2 big-time throws, his 2 turnover-worthy plays, just your thoughts on Jameis last night.
I mean, the most perfect Jameis game we've had in a while, right? Since probably the 30-30 season of just some of the most outrageous throws you'll see anyone even try. The thing I love about Jameis's recklessness is it is not just simply bombs away down the field, right? Where it's what the reputation was in Tampa, like he'll just let it fly down the field. There's certainly a bunch of that. He is throwing throws that no coach would ever allow a quarterback to throw. I'm talking Oppo hash hitches, not within the flow of the play. He has this routine thing, which is where he can often get caught out, where quick out routes are covered really well. And he thinks the only way I can get that out there is if I hang it inside intentionally and someone can spin it behind the head of the covering cornerback. No one else tries those things because they know it's bad. Bad stuff happens. And Jameis tries them all the time, and he completes plenty of them too. And outside of, you mentioned the one pick six, which was bad early in the game, I mean, that is as good as he's probably played. And you have to contrast with how this thing looked when Deshaun Watson was running the show. There was not these guys running wide open down the field. There were not the big time throws splitting between two defenders. There was not the high pointing in the red zone to Njoku the way he did when he got down there. There were not the tight window throws in the red zone, going 3 for 3 early on for touchdowns in the red zone. He is elevating the offense. There are a bunch of busts. We can get into some of the defensive stuff for the Broncos if you want, but I thought there was a bunch of high level throws, which just showed the difference when you get a guy who can really dial it in and rip it down the field compared to what was happening when Watson was running the show.
Yeah, I would love for you to sort of go to the other side of the ball. We were going to talk about the defense I think for both sides, but you want to start with the things on Denver. What did you see from Denver last night?
Well, he does have the huge issue at corner, right? You mentioned Riley Moss. I do think Troy Aikman made an excellent point, I thought, on the broadcast about them having this really late buy and them looking tired. And outside of where they can rotate more in the defensive front, I think linebackers and safeties in particular, I think you could feel the fact that they've played an awful lot of snaps. Even just as a defense generally, without having a late buy in the season, they've played a ton of snaps this season. I did think they looked slightly gassed, and they had a real difficult time communicating anyway. And then you just have a sinkhole at one spot at corner, which kind of corrupts what was the entire defensive game plan. And you've got Jerry Jeudy running wide open all over the place. So just so many busts. And I thought quite unorthodox Vance Joseph decisions in big situations that just went completely against them. A number of busted coverages, even guys like Patrick Surtain busting coverages we're just not used to seeing from him. So just a really lethargic, unexpected performance outside of the edge rushers having some big moments.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it can't be that much of a glaring weak spot for the Denver Broncos. And I wondered if I was going to go into this thinking like, man, there were so many busted coverages last night. I was like, is the Broncos defense maybe not as good as like what we kind of thought they were? No, I really don't think that's the case. I think it was just a lot of miscommunication stuff, not having Riley Moss in there. So I think that was a much bigger issue for them, that when they can get Moss back in the lineup, I think this is still going to be one of the better defenses in the NFL. Not a lot to talk about when it comes to the Cleveland Browns and major takeaways in this game. Them being 3-9 on the season. The offense having a lot more life. To me, though, long-term, as we kind of talk about these teams, we'll start with the Browns. The offense having so much more life with Jameis Winston, to me, only puts more pressure on the Deshaun Watson situation, because he's obviously coming off an Achilles tear. He already kind of was not healthy. He was beat up last year, too. And just straight up, when he was out there, he was bad. I mean, the offense has never looked like this at any point in time while Deshaun Watson has been the quarterback. And so how Jameis is playing is even more damning about the player that you have all of this money tied to in Deshaun Watson, because it's hard to convince yourself that you should go back to that guy outside of just simply the money that you have had poured into him. So for me, I don't know how much money the Browns are really going to have realistically to kind of move around and to bring another quarterback in, because Jameis, I believe, is going to be a free agent. Is that true? Is he? Do you know off the top of your head? Is he? So he's a free agent this offseason, but he's playing well to the point where bringing him back, you're not going to get him as cheap as what you got him for this year to be a certified, to be like absolutely the backup on this team. If they re-sign him, they're going to re-sign him and be like, well, his agents are going to say, wait a second, my guy was better than the guy who was starting, so you're not going to just get my guy for the cheap, and we're not just going to throw you a bone here. So to me, long term, this game and how Jameis Winston has been playing only makes it even harder to go into next season with Deshaun Watson as your starter. Do you sort of feel the same way, whether it's bringing back Jameis or whether it's drafting a quarterback in the first round this year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they can't go in next season to Deshaun Watson. He was quite literally the worst quarterback in the NFL. It was not even really a debate. He was unplayable. They were forced to play him because of a money situation. And they've got this challenge now, right, of not just the Watson money, but what does that rip out of the rest of the roster that needed work anyway? You're not going to have a whole bunch of maneuverability to go and find upgrades all over the roster. Even last night, the offensive line gave up a 29% pressure rate. It's not like James was doing this in a perfect environment where Watson was just missing throws, and now James is hitting some of them. He's making plays on his own and showing, I believe, that he can still be a starter caliber player. And I think that will be the game, because people know you're going to get the turnovers. They know you're going to get some dumb decisions. That's just baked into the Jameis experience at this point. But they'll watch all those throws, all the creativity when there's pressure around him. And someone like the Raiders or a team who wants to go and draft a rookie next season will say, we'll go give that guy, I don't know, 12, 14, $50 million to be a bridge starter for us. We've got a bunch of cap space. Wouldn't we do that? And I think the only thing Cleveland have going in their favor is that like a relationship there where they can speak to Jameis and say like, hey, we love you so much. You love being here. You're having a good time. Can you take a real steep discount because you just love playing football here so much? Seems like a tall ask if he's going to have a pretty decent market, which I would suspect he will do.
So now we go over to the Broncos side of things. Sitting here at 8-5. Sitting pretty, honestly. I mean, this is a team that I did not think that they were going to have this record. I thought that they were going in the right direction. I like the investment in Bo Nix, but man, for them to be 8-5 this season, especially after starting the year 0-2 and to be on the run that they are on, it's pretty impressive. You mentioned they've got the bye week coming up, so they've got a week of rest, which I think is important for this team not having a bye week yet. And then it's the Indianapolis Colts, it's the Los Angeles Chargers. It's two tough matchups at the end of the year. You're facing the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs, and you can say what you want about those teams. You know, the Chiefs not looking like the juggernauts of the past, and the Cincinnati Bengals, you know, being a team that has really struggled this season. But I think that certainly they have the ability to play much better than their record. And anytime you got to go up against Joe Burrow, you know that you got to put up a lot of points, especially for the year that he is having. What's your thoughts overall on the Broncos? Feels like they got a good shot now to sneak into the playoffs and be one of those wild card teams in the AFC.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the AFC, just as neutral fans, it looks like it's pretty much sorted with a month of the season to go, that we just kind of have our playoff race locked in and we'll have some jockeying for seeding. If you just go by something as basic and raw as point differential, which I know has its faults, certainly when you look at different strength of schedules, they are essentially tied for second in the AFC. I would never fathom that this season. I would have thought if it was going to happen, it would have been pure chaos from the defense last night, you know, getting pick sixes, juicing some of the scoring totals. The fact they've had this kind of ebb and flow throughout the season where defensively they have been pretty consistently in the top five for much of the year, but they've had some really rough games and some poor game plans, and they still find ways to win because Peyton is able to completely shapeshift his game plan week to week to try and get enough points on the board, and Bo Nix taking off the way he has over the midpoint to second half of the season. I understand why people would look at it right now and say, hey, you get a rookie quarterback. Is the defense starting to sag a little bit? That's the team you want to play in the first round of the playoffs. But I'm not so sure. I really am not so sure. When you have a really chaotic defense that can create turnovers and a quarterback who is showing that he can pepper all parts of the field and it's not just this kind of one-dimensional, as you mentioned, mesh, screen, take off when he wants to type quarterback, and he seems to be ascending in the second half of the season. I'm not sure if I was Pittsburgh or Buffalo or whoever's going to be in that is the team I would necessarily want to face.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below. So if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can come one today.